when you read the surveys of people asking them what they think about public broadcasting, it's pretty good. Over 1,000 adults polled, PBS and NPR had an 80% favorable rating. Not a single one of us on this side of the panel would look askance at that number. 80% favorable is pretty good. And when you ask if it's fair and balanced, not to steal a line from some other company, 55% said PBS programming is. 79% said NPR is fair and balanced. And that's why it strikes me as odd, Mr. Tomlinson, that we are on this crusade of a sort here, this mission to change what's going on.
Helps people become interested in civic responsibility and in the tradition of Tom Friedman in math and science as well. We have a rich history of cultural programs coming out of WNET in New York that I'd like to see us be able to continue and expand. Obviously, across the river at WETA, we have the great tradition of the Jim Lehrer News Hour. This is journalism dating back to the original McNeil Lehrer Report, journalism that represents the highest standard, and there's never been any question of balance on that program. We look at the importance of the digital conversion. We look at the demands we face in terms of the need for a new interconnection system. I have brought the issue of the importance of political balance, common sense political balance to the public debate. This should not overshadow the needs that public broadcasting has, and I'm very pleased to be here to support those needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tomlinson. We now turn to, you had concluded your verbal presentation. Thank you. Turn now to Ms. Patricia Harrison, President and CEO of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Prior to taking her current position, she served as Assistant Secretary of State for Education and Cultural Affairs. In 1997, she was elected co-chairman of the National Republican Committee, serving there until January of 2001. A graduate of American University. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Harrison, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, have submitted my written testimony.
All written testimony will be made a part of the record in full.
Great. I'd like, with your permission, to use my time just to make a few brief remarks.
That's fine.
Thank you. First, let me express my strong commitment to and belief in the mission of public broadcasting. Although I have been in the position of President and CEO of CPB for only 5 working days, it's a belief I have long held, and it began when I served as an intern at WAMU as a student at American University. It continues. The CPB board and its staff, the public broadcasting stations, national organizations, public and private funders in an open and transparent way in order to serve the millions of Americans who turn to public broadcasting each week. Now let me turn to the budget. CPB is requesting $430 million in advance appropriations for fiscal year 08. The vast majority of which will go directly to local television and radio stations for locally based, locally relevant operations. The corporation requests $45 million in fiscal year 06 for the ongoing conversion to digital technology. We are requesting $40 million in 06 to fund the replacement of the public television interconnection system. Mr. Chairman, I recognize that we make these requests at a time of great pressure on the federal budget. But when we appeal to Congress for funds, we should recognize that hundreds of thousands of Americans are already including public broadcasting support in their personal budgets by writing checks to support these programs. And the fact is that every dollar of federal funding is matched 6 times over by voluntary contributions from viewers, foundations, universities, state and local governments, corporations, and small business owners. And of every dollar of federal funding we receive, 95 cents of that dollar goes to the local stations and services they provide. Public broadcasting really represents the best example of public-private partnerships. We've all read the research on the importance of early learning, and though Sesame Street showed us the way 37 years ago, the need is even greater today. Public television is responding to that need, and in fact, it is public television's responsibility. Whether we are talking about ages 2 through 8 and early learning programs or middle school to high school with a focus on history and civics, the aim is to ensure our country's successor generation is prepared for the future. For those who've questioned the relevance of public broadcasting in a multi-channel world, the answer is public broadcasting is more relevant than ever. We address community needs, we provide entertainment, education, information programming, and none of this is matched anywhere else in the 500-channel universe. And that's just one of the reasons more than 100 million.
That on all subjects, we represent the diversity of perspectives that is in this country.
Yes, Senator Inouye, I welcome this opportunity to address your question, and also in an oblique way, Mr. Boaz. CPB is the only organization within public broadcasting that really is tasked to look at the concerns you expressed. Are we taking care of minorities? Are we looking at rural communities? Are we doing the outreach, which only public broadcasting can do, prior to a program and after, involving communities? My father, when he died, had Alzheimer's. I only wish that my mother had been able to access a recent program that public broadcasting did on Alzheimer's that wasn't just a program. It had a shelf life long after the program was over. It involved caretakers and organizations. And after you watched this series, you felt there was some light at the end of the tunnel. Commercial television cannot do this. And this is the focus that CPB has and the mandate that we have, that it is not an elite programming entity, that we look at the big picture. And children more and more, if I keep harping on that, if we don't focus on children, we're not going to have a very positive big picture for anyone across the line of all issues. Thank you.
And do you believe that our funding, federal funding, is in our national interest?
I certainly do. And you know, I don't want to appear as an instant expert. I've only been on this job for 4.5 working days. But what surprised me was that in 1975, in an amendment to the Public Broadcasting Act, President Ford at the time not only wanted federal funding, he suggested it be 5 years out. And also, there is the authority to fund up to 40%, and the percentage has been going down. So we're at 15% now. I think the highest was 19%. 15% is modest, and I think all credit to the stations who have raised 85% of what they need to do, which keeps it local.
I notice my time is up, sir.
Thank you very much to Senator Inouye. Senator Stevens? Well, the early bird rule would go to Senator Durbin, but the practice of the committee has been to alternate between the sides.
I'm not prepared yet.
Senator Durbin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the panel. I especially thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing, because if your experience is like mine, this is an issue on the minds of a lot of people. What's happening to public broadcasting? Are we going through some effort now to politicize this, to change the nature and philosophy of something that we value very much in this country? I'm a fan, have been for a long time. Obviously, I'm not alone. When you read the surveys of people asking them what they think about public broadcasting, it's pretty good. Over 1,000 adults polled, PBS and NPR had an 80% favorable rating. Not a single one of us on this side of the panel would look askance at that number. 80% favorable is pretty good. And when you ask if it's fair and balanced, not to steal a line from some other company, 55% said PBS programming is. 79% said NPR is fair and balanced. And that's why it strikes me as odd, Mr. Tomlinson, that we are on this crusade of a sort here, this mission to change what's going on. I don't quite get it, understand what your agenda is here and what you're trying to achieve. I read and I watched over the break Mr. Moyer's speech in St. Louis, ordered a copy online, read it twice. It's troubling to me. I think Bill Moyer's program now was a balanced program, and I think most people would agree with it. Now, Mr. Mann, that you hired, or someone hired, to monitor this program, came up with some rather strange conclusions about who's a liberal and who's a conservative and who's a friend of the president and who isn't. And even I think in your opening statement, you have tried to clarify that you don't stand by his conclusions. So, for example, on Senator Hagel, characterization of Senator Hagel as liberal and such. Maybe you do think he's a liberal, and I don't know what that conclusion might be. But the point I'd like to get to is this. Let's go to a specific question. Under Section 19 of Public Broadcasting Act, you're required to mandate political balance on all shows. It's been reported that you have championed the addition of Wall Street Journal editorial report to the PBS lineup and that you've raised money for that purpose. I'd like you to clarify. If you did that, how much money was raised? What was your purpose in bringing in the Wall Street Journal, which has been noted is a publication owned by a company that's been very profitable and wouldn't appear to need a subsidy to put on a show?
Well, I think Senator Stevens hit the nail on the head. No bias from the left, no bias from the right. If we have programs like the Warriors program that tilt clearly to the left, then I think it's according to the law, we need to have a program that goes along with it that tilts to the right and let the people decide.
Let me ask you about this clearly to the left bias on the Moyers show. How did you reach that conclusion? Did you watch a lot of those shows?
I watched a lot of those shows, and I think Mr. Mann's research demonstrates that the program was clearly liberal advocacy journalism. It was good broadcasting. Bill Moyers is a very capable broadcaster, but it seems to me we should be able to agree that we don't want bias, and if we do, in the interest of provoking debate, if we have some bias on public television, let's balance it out in the course of the evening.
So what was Mr. Mann's expertise? Why did you happen to hire him? According to Senator Dorgan, who's seen the raw data, he was paid thousands of dollars. His data, riddled with spelling errors, was faxed to you from a Hallmark store in downtown Indianapolis. What is this man's background for judging a program like Moyers' program and whether it's liberal or not?
Well, he worked for 20 years for the National Journalism Center, which is a 401c3 organization.
National Journalism Center?
National Journalism
What
Center.
is that? I don't
But the point of watching...
Excuse me, what is a National Journalism System?
It was a center here in Washington that found internships for...
And they're straight down the middle of the road, moderate, centrist group, right and left?
I think it qualified for 401c3 support, but I think it was regarded as right of center. But the point is, it's like Bob Dylan said, you don't need to weather the vane to see which way the wind's blowing. It was very clear that the Moyers program was liberal advocacy journalism. I wanted a statistical basis because I didn't think people were responding appropriately. We got the statistical basis, and as soon as...
From Mr. Mann?
From Mr. Mann's research. And as soon as we got the statistical basis, it turned out other people had determined that program should be balanced. It was balanced. All this took place something like a year and a half ago.
Well, I've got to get to the basic question here, and I won't go through the list of some of Mr. Moyers' more liberal guests, Frank Gaffney, Grover Norquist, Richard Viguerie, Paul Gigot, on his liberal program. But let me ask you this, if I can.
Yes, sir.
Did you feel that it was your responsibility or authority to go out and put together the Wall Street editorial page show and to find subsidy for that? Did you feel that that was your responsibility to do?
I felt that the law required us to reflect balance in our current affairs programming. I was not the only one involved in encouraging a program that represented a diverse point of view from the Moyers show.
So following Mr. Moyers' comments in St. Louis, can we expect you to do the same for The Nation magazine? Are you going to raise $5 million to make sure they have a show?
I don't see that today we have a balanced problem. We have a 30-minute show now, and we have a 30-minute show Wall Street Journal. That's balance. Let the people decide. Balance is common sense.
But Mr. Thomason, the people, I said at the outset, already decided. They thought that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was presenting balance. And they thought that, they gave it a high approval rating. You have perceived a problem here which the American people obviously don't perceive.
Well, certainly in terms of Jim Lehrer News Hour, there is no balance problem. That is great journalism. Public broadcasting has a great reputation in these areas. We had a period of time 2 years ago where I think we were all asleep at the switch in terms of the mortgage programming. I never wanted to take the mortgage program off the hour.
Hey, what do you mean by asleep at the switch with the Moyers program? I'd like you to tell me a little bit more.
Because we should have been aware that on Friday evening, if you presented liberal advocacy journalism for an hour, you really should present conservative advocacy journalism for an hour, just for a matter of balance. The law requires balance.
And this was your conclusion based on Mr. Mann's investigation?
Well, this was my conclusion, and when I found that there was a dispute over my view of this program and the general review of this program, I quite frankly have run into next to no serious people who regarded the mortgage program as anything other than good liberal advocacy program.
Will you accept his invitation to take an hour, go on the air on public television, and to debate that issue?
Well, absolutely, but you know...
Oh, you will accept it?
Oh, absolutely, but you know, Senator Durbin, Bill Moyers and I both have concluded that this debate is not good for public television.
No, it isn't.
You know, there were things that Moyers said in that speech about me that were most inaccurate and unfair. It saddened me to see that. I could have come back in kind. I chose not to. We're for public broadcasting. We're for no bias in public broadcasting. We don't want bias on the right, and we don't want bias on the left.
I've gone over my time. I thank the chairman for giving me a couple extra minutes, and I'll wait for a next round.
Thank you, sir.
I thought we had a little more leeway here, Senator Durbin, than we do on the Judiciary Committee, so the red light was flexible. Senator Stevens, would you care to question?
Well, I'd clear up the Senator from Illinois' confusion. I think Bill Moyers is biased, and I respect him for it. I think he's a very talented spokesman for his point of view at the political spectrum. I applaud you for recognizing that and counterbalancing it. And I think your support will demonstrate that in the long run. But the main thing is I want to get back to the financing of this, because that's the question before us, really. I just was waiting for the information, Mr. Chairman. My state contributed $5.3 million as a state to public broadcasting stations in Alaska, because we recognize the need for the system and to maintain it. I do believe that all states that have similar dependent communities should recognize it and should come forward and support it. I'd like to know whether you can tell me about the concepts that have been left out of this bill this year. The satellite upgrade of $40 million, the request from the president was deleted. The digital programming of $45 million was deleted. Each of those had money in the fiscal year 05, and the Ready to Learn program of $32 million was deleted. Now, those are the items that we're really concerned with. CPB request was $430 million. The House brought it down to $400 million. There are lots of small adjustments that have to be made in these bills this year. I'm not as disturbed about that as I am disturbed about the deletion of satellite upgrading, digital programming, and Ready to Learn, the Ready to Learn program, which I think has been eminently successful in places like the rural stations that I mentioned in my state. Now, who among you would be willing to talk about the satellite upgrade and its necessity? Mr. Lawson, is that you?
Yes, sir, I'll take that one. It's been a federal responsibility since day one to provide for this interconnection between the stations for the distribution of programming. And Congress with your support, funded that in the early 90s. That system is becoming obsolete. The satellite leases are expiring. If that system's not renewed, then we're FedExing tapes around. This is the system, this is the glue that holds our whole system together in terms of technical infrastructure. And the exciting thing about the next generation, right now, we're feeding a lot of programming to tape machines. It's expensive. It's very labor intensive. This system will allow more peer-to-peer, station-to-station interaction. They will literally be emailing programs around as attachments to emails. So you're going to see Alaska and stations all over this country with this new system, not only receiving the PBS programming over the satellite, but they themselves will be able to move programming around and share it with other stations without even having to go through a national organization like PBS. So The infrastructure for the satellite interconnection is absolutely crucial. Without it, we're not connected.
Let me tell you a little history. When I moved to Alaska, our programming, such as sports and weekly programming, they were sent up by tapes to Alaska. So if you had a baseball game on Friday in the first in Washington, D.C., you'd see it in the 8th in Alaska. I soon got out of the habit of watching baseball. My point is right now, what this means is real-time delivery to the country as a whole. Satellite interconnections are available in the South 48. If in many places you can use fiber or you can use other connections, but in the rural part of the country, that satellite connection is absolutely important. So I want to assure you that's one thing, and I think my colleagues say it in Hawaii, those small stations around the islands. Actually, if you put a ring around Hawaii, it'd be bigger than Alaska. Did you know that? We don't let them count the water, but it's ours is frozen in between, but his is open water. But the point is we need that. Now, digital programming, who's going to tell us about the digital programming and the reason for even the president increased it by $6 million? Who wants to comment on that? Is that yours too, Mr. Lawton? No, Mr. Harrison?
Well, again, jumping in probably where I shouldn't, but as somebody new to this position, I come with a fresh eye, I do believe, and I'm just so impressed. Just to give you an example, there's something called the Think Bright Digital Content Initiative, and that's going to be programming targeted to address 5 community needs: family literacy, success in school, family health, learning disabilities, civic engagements, and it's going to also include research and development. What is really happening as we move into this new technology, and again, that's part of the 1967 mandate, as we keep up with changing technology so we can be that connector to the community, we are now facing almost a different viewer and listener, not the passive viewer or listener, but the viewer and listener who wants to really have input, who wants to participate. Now, right now, we're saying this is the younger generation.
It wasn't an official government imprimatur, and we understand that in a free society, Showtime can pretty much show what it wants to. So I think if you depoliticize, you will avoid this problem of getting 2 ombudsmen or a new chairman, a new president. You take it completely out of the realm of politics.
Ms. Mitchell, do you think there is any substance at all to Mr. Boaz's contention of political bias on public broadcasting?
The public opinion polls certainly substantiate our firm conviction that we are producing a schedule that meets our editorial standards and that meets the obligations for fairness and balance. Might I also respond to something else you said that you asked?
Before you go on to another subject, I don't think that's quite responsive to my question. My question was, do you think there's any basis for Mr. Boaz's contention that there is political bias on public broadcasting?
We take every allegation of that very seriously. And last year, out of 3,000 hours, there were less than 30 hours that rose to what we would consider any kind of questionable controversy. But 2 years ago, we looked at our editorial standards and said they need to be updated. We need to be very clear with our producers what we expect from them in terms of fairness and objectivity, accuracy, and transparency. We clarified it.
Is your answer no?
The answer is we work very hard to ensure that there isn't. And when there is an opinion or a point of view, Senator, we are very clear that that's what the viewer is hearing. It is someone's point of view, someone's commentary.
Well, okay, I interpret that to mean possibly. To the extent that there's any possible bias, what you're saying is that you take every step you can to eliminate it?
In dealing with controversial issues, we require of our producers that they do the most thorough, accurate, transparent process to examine, and we take on the complex issues, Mr. Chairman, as you know, many of which are not taken on by mainstream media. And we don't attempt, except in our news program, to balance everything within a segment or within a program, because that's what the law requires. And we believe that there's a better understanding and comprehension if you do it over a series of programs. But we take very seriously any charge that our programs are not representing the diversity of perspectives in this country. And we think of ourselves as a big tent, where a Bill Moyers and a Paul Gigot and a Tavis Smiley and a Gwen Ifill all are welcome.
Ms. Harrison, do you have anything you'd like to add? We're about to conclude the hearing.
Just very briefly, there are some mechanisms in place because public broadcasting, the word most important is the public. So there's a toll-free number. Viewers and listeners can call in. We direct them to also connected links. We have a very vigorous email program. So we're hearing from viewers and listeners all the time. And these are remarks and observations that are not just dismissed. I'm very busy answering my own enormous mail right now, and I have to tell you, the interesting thing is I'm getting about the same degree from people saying it's too left and the same degree it's too right. Concerns on both. And I think we have a very passionate listener and viewer audience. And I think the Office of the Ombudsman is a good step.
Mr. Lawson, anything you'd care to add?
Yes, sir. My association was the author of the amendment in question that prompted Mr. Tomlinson to hire the two lobbyists. That just speaks to the need for...
I didn't hire the lobbyists, John. They were hired by the front office.
Mr. Chairman, it just speaks to the need for greater transparency in the way that CPB operates, and we would like to pick up the conversation we had with the Senate Commerce Committee last year and the rest of Congress to work with some reforms to the way CPB operates.
Mr. Tomlinson, awaiting the Moyers-Tomlinson debate. Do you have anything else to add now?
No, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your support of public broadcasting.
Mr. Boaz will give you the last word if you want it.
I feel like Daniel in the lion's den, but I'm glad to have the last word. I believe that the controversies that
Daniel didn't do too badly, neither of you.
I believe the controversies that we're discussing are an illustration of the problem I raised, that it's inevitable to, you're going to have politicization if you have government funding. That's why I think public radio and television would be better off without government funding.
Thank you all very much for coming in, and let me tell you that drawing 4 senators on a Monday morning in Washington is high praise for this panel and this subject. That concludes the hearing.
Thank you.
Public broadcasting's role in educating children. First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton moderates this panel at the White House. You'll hear from John Wright of the Center for Research on the Influences of TV on Children, Peggy Charan from the group Action for Children's Television, and Joan Dykstra, who's president of the National PTA. This program runs 45 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States.
Good morning and welcome everyone to the White House for this very important meeting. I am delighted that you could all be with us, and I want particularly to recognize a few people who were able to join us this morning. We have Representative Jim Moran from across the river in Virginia, and Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton from here in the District of Columbia. We are also delighted that Richard Carlson, the president of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Irvin Duggan, the president of the Public Broadcasting Service, Delano Lewis, the president of National Public Radio, and Larry Irving, the secretary for communications in the Department of Commerce, are also all here with us. This is a meeting about a very important subject. It is about the role that television plays in the lives of our children, and particularly the role of public broadcasting. I think that it is very important in our country today to acknowledge and admit that television is a pervasive influence in our lives and has a particularly significant impact on the development of our children. There are some who have engaged in a long discussion, even an argument over the last decades about what television means in our lives, what the role of violence, for example, in television is. But I would like to focus today on an issue that we are now finding more about and that I hope will influence the debate about the role of public broadcasting and its contribution to children's development as we struggle with and argue over the proper role of government. Public broadcasting is for many, many children the only channel available that has consistently effective educational programming. Probably about 40% of our families in America do not have access to cable television. And because of the demographics and incomes of those 40% of our families, we know that they have a disproportionate number of our children. More than 40% of our children reside in those 40% of our families. If you were to look, as I have done, at the daily television schedule of our 3 major networks and our public broadcasting channel, you would see what is available for those children in those homes. Now, certainly there are other options on cable, but they are often far outnumbered by channels that provide information and programming that is not always suitable for our children. But looking only at the 4 available channels that those 40% of our families have access to, it is clear that what is available to children with respect to their educational and developmental needs is not usually found on commercial television. It is found during the day on public broadcasting. And there are those who think that the educational programming of public broadcasting is a luxury. But to them I would ask, what is the necessity that can be substituted for that luxury? Where are the outlets for the kind of hopeful, productive, learning opportunities that children have access to on public broadcasting day in and day out? But you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take anybody's word for it. We actually have research. We have evidence about the impact of television and the impact, in particular, of public broadcasting. One of my great hopes from a meeting such as this is that our decision makers will not just engage in ideological discussions, but will make decisions based on the evidence that we have available to us. If one disagrees with the evidence, fine, provide counter evidence. But it is difficult to engage in a conversation about what is in the best interests of our children if the people engaging in it are merely taking ideological positions. And so today I've asked some people who have a great deal of experience and knowledge about the impact of television and particularly the impact of public broadcasting on children and especially on low-income children who often do not have the educational opportunities, the intellectual stimulation, the academic preparation that many of us try to provide for our own children. I'm sure anyone who has followed our national discussion about television knows of the woman I'm about to introduce. She is someone who for many years has been, in effect, sounding the alarm about the impact of television. I wish that alarm were heard in every family, more loudly than it sometimes is, as well as in the boardrooms and legislative chambers of our country, because she has pointed out time and time again that children are shaped by what they see, by what they hear, by what they are taught. And the constant, pervasive presence of television in most of our homes is a challenge for parents who will have to learn and be willing to accept responsibility for monitoring more closely the television watching of their children, but it is also a challenge for the larger society. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Peggy Charon. She is the founder of Action for Children's Television and is currently serving as a visiting scholar at Harvard, continuing to examine and accumulate and analyze evidence about the impact of television on our children's lives. Peggy?
Thank you. You know, I think that after those remarks from the nation's First Lady, maybe it won't take another 30 years to get attention to be paid to what television can do for children. Certainly PBS has been doing it during these 30 years. And it's really nifty to have this opportunity to talk about families and television in this very special home of the First Family. Thank you. In the audience today, in this very beautiful East Room, are representatives of 45 major national organizations who care about what television does to and for their children. They strongly support public broadcasting, and the membership in these groups comes from the education community, the health community, the religious community, and others. And the number of members for these groups, I added up before I came, and it came to a mind-boggling number, 130,412,740. Now, I know that you can be a Catholic pediatrician who's also a member of the PTA, so it's conceivable the number is a little high, but it certainly is a lot of families. Let me tell you why we're here. Although public television can and should serve a diversity of audiences, and I know that very well since it serves me and I'm a senior citizen and I would hate to think it would stop serving me, today we want to focus on what it does for children. At a time when so many of us are horrified by the amount of vicious violence and other problems available in film and video, we can focus on how television provides a safe haven, how public broadcasting provides a safe haven for our children. And at a time when prejudice and discrimination are making national headlines, public TV provides lessons for young audiences about respect and tolerance and love. And at a time when kids' TV is too full of 30-minute commercials for toys and food that they probably shouldn't eat, it's nice that PBS offers them a commercial-free alternative. And at a time when the cost of new technology, you know, CD-ROMs, which I love to get for my grandchildren, and cable, and home video even, the cost of those technologies widens the information gap between the rich and the poor, and public broadcasting, as you said, provides access for all children. And then last of all, but certainly not least important, is that at a time when school budgets are getting slashed right and left, public television provides a cost-effective, curriculum-related support system that promotes learning. You know, I remember many, many years ago, because my younger daughter is now having children, but when she was watching Mr. Rogers, she went to school, it was the first day of school, and she came home and I was in the next room and I heard her say, Mr. Rogers, I started school today. And I didn't know whether I should be a little disconcerted that she really thought he was in the TV set listening to her after all the talk we did in our house about television. But I felt good that she knew that he'd be interested, that she had found another teacher. And I guess I'm here because I love public broadcasting. It provides valuable services for my children, for me, for my grandchildren. And without it, children's TV would resemble a children's library with only comic books, which is really a very depressing thought. And now I'd like to present the three experts up front with us. They're going to introduce themselves, but I'll just say first we'll hear from John Wright, who is at the University of Kansas and is part of the Robert Dole Human Development Center at the University of Kansas. And second, we'll hear from Sonia Manzano, and I don't have to tell you that she is, Sonia is Maria on Sesame Street and has been so for just about the whole length of that show has been on the air. And lastly, we have Joan Dykstra, who is the head of the National PTA and has been head of it for something like, is it 10 days? 10 days. And they'll introduce themselves and tell you, what public broadcasting does, how they do it, and why it's important. John, you go first.
Thank you, Peggy. I said I would do this formally, so I will say my name is John Wright. I'm a professor at the University of Kansas. I teach human development, psychology, communication studies, and everything I do and everything I'm going to talk about, half of it was done by my wife and colleague and partner, co-director of the Center for Research on the Influences of Television on Children, Professor Aletha Houston. We have recently completed a study that has, I think for the first time, shed some strong light on the causal relationship of viewing television to subsequent success in school. It is no longer scientifically valid to talk about the medium of television as if it were a monolithic and homogeneous whole. Our recent research has shown, for example, that its effects on young children's readiness to learn and preparation for going to school can be either positive or negative between the ages of 2 and 5, depending on what they watch. Now that's painfully obvious. I'm sure the First Lady knew that long before it was scientific data. But you see, we need it. We need to know it. We need to know it as incontrovertibly as we know that smoking is associated with lung cancer. Nor is it any longer appropriate to describe American television as a vast wasteland. Thanks to the energies of activists like Peggy Charon and the wisdom of the Congress in passing the Children's Television Act of 1990, the stewardship of the Federal Communications Commission, and thanks to the contributions of educators, producers, and social scientists concerned with the vast positive potentials of television for young children, we know that there are ecological islands of new growth in that wasteland. In fact, almost any of it can be reclaimed in the service of children where there is a will, where there is an understanding of how it impacts children for good or evil, and a determination that the airwaves that we all own shall be used for the well-being of all the public, including especially young children. What is new about the research that Aletha Houston and I bring to the table today is that for the first time we have direct evidence of the consistent direction and magnitude of the effects of viewing television between the ages of 2 and 5 on nationally standardized tests of achievement in pre-reading skills, vocabulary, mathematical reasoning, and overall school readiness, and even adjustment when they finally get to school. The evidence is this, and I won't get technical, but we have a report that's available, and we'll supply them to anyone who asks. Low to middle income children who watch as little as 25 minutes per day of educational programs like Sesame Street, between the ages of 2 and 5, do significantly better on all the school readiness indicators that we have by the time they start kindergarten. These same children who watch educational programs consistently spend more time reading. And in fact, the more they watch educational programming, the more time they spend reading and being read to. The more, the more. They also spend more time in other educational activities than those who watch no educational programs. Moreover, the data on the same families over the same period of time, show a nearly equal-sized disadvantage on the same outcome measures for children who watch 25 minutes or more per day of non-educational commercial cartoons. Now, for the first time, we've got the same kids over a 3-year period of time, intensively studied, evaluated at home, evaluated on national standardized tests, and we've got both directions of effect. So to condemn all of television as bad for children is like tearing up the family library card if your community library, for example, had 85% of the books that were manifestly inappropriate for children and 15% that were good children's literature. You wouldn't do that. And we won't turn the television set to the wall. We're going to get better children's television. It's our airwaves and we deserve it. What parents need to understand is that the medium is a powerful tool for good or bad, and that properly used in appropriate amounts, it can be markedly beneficial in getting a child started early on a positive quest for understanding and a joy in learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm Sonia Manzano. I've been an actress and writer on Sesame Street for the past 22 years. People always ask me how I could still be interested in being on a show for so long. And I have to think that it's because I can remember so vividly when I was a kid in the Bronx watching hours and hours of television and never seeing anybody that looked like me, and never seeing anybody that spoke like me, and never seeing a community that looked anything like mine. I also remember very clearly the first time I saw Sesame Street. It was the Student Union of Carnegie Mellon University, and there was James Earl Jones with his bald head and his baritone voice reciting the alphabet with the letters flashing over his head. He was going A, B, C. And I thought, what is this about? What is this show for? And then I saw the cast come on. I saw Susan and Gordon, and it was shocking because I had never seen people of color on television. And then I saw how they lived their lives, and they had a wonderful family life, and one was a teacher, and one was a nurse, and they had adopted a child. And it was such a pleasure to see people that were very much like the people that I knew, that lived their lives very much like the people that I lived with. I was so happy to eventually become an actress on the show and be able to write segments for the show about family life. I was able to write about Maria's marriage, and I was able to write about Maria giving birth. And I was able to do this from my Hispanic point of view. I don't think that could happen anyplace else but public television. I know that if a child spends his childhood not seeing himself reflected in society, which is mostly on television, it will wear him down. And it will become very hard for him to believe the well-meaning teachers that say, if you study, you can be this. If you apply yourself, you can be this. If he does not see himself in the media, if he does not see himself reflected in society. Sesame Street has created a community of inclusion, and public television is the only place that I feel I can write from my heart. I have never been asked to speak with a Spanish accent, and I have never been asked to write with a more Latin flair than on public television. Now, people say, well, after 25 years, what are you folks going to do next? And we have a wonderful research department that takes its cues from the needs of American children. For example, race relations in this country are something that Sesame Street felt we had to focus on very seriously. This is a very complicated issue to break down so that a child can understand. And what Sesame Street does is take something that's very complicated and try and make it as simple as possible. Race relations is very difficult because we're teaching two things at the same time: self-esteem and appreciation of others. The way that we've handled that is in one particular segment, you'll have a puppet talking to Whoopi Goldberg. The puppet loves Whoopi Goldberg's skin. It's so beautiful. It's so dark. She says, well, I love my skin too. However, the puppet loves her skin so much, he would like to have her skin, wherein Whoopi Goldberg has to correct him and say, oh, but your fur, look at your fur. Your fur is so fabulous too, and it's red. Therefore, in that comedic moment, we can explain a concept that is, I think, very complicated to children. As I said when I started speaking, I never saw anybody like myself on television. And I'm happy to say that the little girl who plays my daughter on Sesame Street, a Hispanic actress, didn't have that same experience because for all her 9 years of being alive, she has seen people like her on public television. We were rushing to finish a segment recently, and she was rushing off to go to the opening of her movie. And the crew was teasing me because I wasn't rushing off to go to the opening of my movie, and she was. And they said, why aren't you doing the same? And I looked to her and I said, timing. And I thought, what do I mean by that? And it's because I realized that when I was 8 years old, there was no such things as Puerto Ricans. Because from where I was sitting, I did not see myself reflected in society. She does not have that experience. She has role models. She already knows that she is a part of this society. She knows that she can contribute to it because it recognizes her. I think that we are making a difference, and I think that this is no time to stop or slow down. Gracias.
Good morning. I am Joan Dykstra, and I am president of the National PTA. I am here representing more than 6.8 million members, most of them involved, concerned parents who pay attention to what their children are watching on television. I'm delighted to address the National PTA's ongoing support for public broadcasting in America. Many of you in this room know that for more than 2 decades, the PTA has been on a crusade to improve the quality of programming that all children watch on network television. During that crusade, we have often cited public television as the reasonable alternative for parents who are fed up with the violence and the commercialism on all of our channels. As president of the PTA and as a parent, I can say with certainty, public broadcasting is a resource we cannot afford to lose. My own children counted Bert and Ernie and Big Bird as their friends, Maria, and they learned how to count and to spell, and most importantly, how to get along with children in that process. I had a few moments of fame myself when I was donned Big Bird's costume as part of a school bus safety program for PTA that was sponsoring at my children's school. The kids paid more attention to Big Bird, had to say, than they would have if I was just Jay and Tammy's mom. As my children got older, our family enjoyed many episodes of Masterpiece Theater and Nature Together. The history, the science, the geography, the pageantry that's presented through public broadcasting is like a living encyclopedia at our very own fingertips. For the past 2 years at PTA, we had the extraordinary pleasure of working with Fred Rogers as our honorary chairman. He has such incredibility for both our parents and for all of us as children. When he spoke at our convention last summer, little children literally ringed the stage to be as close as they could to their hero. And when he finished his remarks, parents rushed to the stage for his autograph. He was a hero to them too. PTA indeed was in the neighborhood. Like it or not, television has a dramatic impact on all of our children. Public television has consistently demonstrated restraint, creativity, imagination, and maturity in the quality of program that it presents for children and adults. It is indeed a valuable educational tool from everyone from preschoolers to retirees. Most importantly, it is accessible to just about everybody, regardless of their financial status, regardless of your educational background, regardless of your ethnic heritage. It offers you a world through a window and an opportunity for growth and learning that is unprecedented in any other form of mass communication today. As a citizen, as a parent, And as president of the PTA, I'm here to add my voice to the chorus of concern about keeping public broadcasting an available and vital resource for all of us as Americans, but more importantly, for all of America's children. Thank you.
There's time for a few questions, and I thought that, given that we have the First Lady with us, we would let the First Lady ask the questions today instead of the audience.
Well, the one thought that kept running through my mind after what we've heard is, can you imagine any child rushing home from the first day of school and trying to tell the Power Rangers that she'd gone to school? You know, there's just sort of a disconnect there. Well, I really find everything that each of you has said to be borne out in our common experience. Really, it is common sense. But let's see if we can maybe take it one step further for people who are still saying to themselves, well, if this is so important, commercial television will pick up the slack. If this is so significant in the lives of our children, there will be a market for it. So all of what you're saying can be understood and in our common experience. Really, it is common sense. But let's see if we can maybe take it one step further for people who are still saying to themselves, well, if this is so important, commercial television will pick up the slack. If this is so significant in the lives of our children, there will be a market for it. So all of what you're saying can be understood and accepted, but doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion that you have to have a public television presence with designated programming for children in order to make the point that each of you has supported. So let me ask both Peggy and John and then everyone else to comment. Why isn't it likely that if the worst were to happen and the programming that we've already talked about and the significance of it that the research has demonstrated were to disappear, that vacuum wouldn't be filled by the existing marketplace?
I think that if there's anything that my 27 years of activism on behalf of choices for children on television has proved, it is that even with a lot of conferences, even with articles in the paper, even with the people who make that kind of television having children, they will not provide the kind of programming that children need that really enhances education. They are more comfortable with the other kind of programming, and the problem is that when you talk to 2 to 15-year-olds in a voice that you want to tell them something important, you speak in a different language to preschoolers, to elementary age kids, and to older kids. And if you want to get the most eyeballs watching the commercials, you tend to say things that all children will listen to. And maybe all children do read comic books at one point. But when you want to talk to them about how wonderful literature is, you do it the way the book business does. And public broadcasting handles that screen the way the book business handles children's books. Professor?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about with respect to the private sector is not that it's unwise, not that it's entirely vicious, not that it's a handicapping condition to the entertainment and education of children, but that they are focused entirely on the bottom line. They exploit children. They gather eyeballs glued to TV sets, which they then sell to ad agencies and advertisers, who then re-exploit the children to sell them products they don't need, food that's not good for them, and toys that enhance their fantasy and their willingness to attend the programs which gather their eyeballs for sale. I think I'll stop on that line. But the research that they do I spoke to the executive producer of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I asked her, what kind of research do you do? How do you know what messages you are getting across to children? And she said to me, and this is a quote, after every rap, we sit around and we ask each other, what questions, what have we answered? What ideas would children take away from this episode that we have just made? And in the research community, this was at a Children Now conference, and some of you were there. In fact, you were there by television. Everybody said, you asked who? They said, we asked ourselves. Until we start asking the children, until we start doing the research that's something other than market research, until we leave a program like My So-Called Life, one of the few decent programs for young people that the commercial sector ever made, it's canceled. Not enough eyeballs to sell. Not a wide enough range of children watching it. And every network has done that. I can remember Hot Hero Sandwich on NBC, a wonderful, wonderful program. What happened to Big Blue Marble on ABC? And many, many, many more. It's incompatible. The system is incompatible. You've got to do it because the airwaves belong to the people, the children belong to the people, and you've got to have something for kids that is theirs.
Well, I'd just like to say that the private sector won't pick up the slack because I'm always amazed that Sesame Street hasn't been imitated in the private sector. We've been on the air so long and everybody agrees that we're great, but nobody cares to imitate us. And like you said, there were all these wonderful shows for children. They get canceled right away. I was asked once to write for a children's show on commercial television, and I asked, what age group is the show aimed at? And they said, oh, you know, kids. Well, how could you don't write for a 3-year-old the same way you write for a 5-year-old, and certainly not a 7-year-old. So I knew immediately that they hadn't even examined themselves, and they didn't even know what they were going to say to these children. It was bottom line. And they started out with the result of what they wanted their show to do, which was sell a certain product, not what the show was about.
And one of the worst problems that happened in the last few years is that the show itself has become a product too often on children's television, on commercial broadcasting. And that's unfortunate because it bludges that line between editorial and commercial speech, so you don't know who's talking to you. And it means that we're telling our children, 1 in 4 of whom lives below the poverty line, what they should spend money on to feel good, to have friends, and that's really very sad. They can do what they do as long as we have the part of that broadcasting service that is saved for public broadcasting, which cares first about the public and first about our children. And I'm not sure they care about anything else at all.
Joan, do you want anything? No, I think everyone has stated it very clearly. I think the bottom line is that we want quality programming for children. They have an opportunity. They can give us quality programming. I fail to see where it is. I do know that PBS brings me quality programming for children.
You know, I think it's an important point that the economy that we all rely on is driven by a need to create aspirations and expectations and really unfilled wants. I mean, that's how people continue to buy goods and services. So that's really the reason for a market economy in a way that is going to continue to grow and provide more prosperity for people. It has to be rooted in a funny kind of way in people's insecurity. I mean, if all of us today said to ourselves, we have more than enough stuff, we are not buying anything else, and we really meant it, you know, that would not be good for the economy. So there is a need on the part of the economy, and particularly one like ours, to continue to try to create in our minds the desire for more and different things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is the way the system works. But I do think there is a dark side that we don't pay attention to. And it's something that was just alluded to, that when we turn our children and think of our children as miniature adults and really see them primarily as consumers, as little shoppers who we want to turn into grown-up buyers of as many goods and services as we possibly can sell them, that has a very different perspective than if we see them as individuals with certain potentials who it is our responsibility as parents, as citizens to nurture. And so there is an inherent conflict, as the professor pointed out. And it is very difficult, I think, to be fair to commercial television, for them to fulfill a nurturing developmental responsibility when that is not, as they clearly understand, their bottom line. So part of what we have to do as a society is to assign different roles and responsibilities to different sectors of our society. And commercial television has a different role and responsibility, particularly as it pertains to children, than public broadcasting. And I think without that kind of choice, it is very difficult for parents, even those trying hard to be conscientious ones, Joan, to do what they believe they should do. I mean, teaching values to children in between commercials on Saturday morning cartoons is a lot harder, believe me, than watching Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers or Barney or something like that with your child. So it's not an either or, and that's what I think we have to keep trying to emphasize. It is not an either or, where it's only commercial television or it's only public broadcasting. It is both and. We have to see the responsibilities, particularly for child rearing, in a much broader way, so that each sector of our society, starting with parents but expanding far beyond just the nuclear family, understands they have a role in determining how well our children turn out. And that's really what your research has shown, is that we know children are going to watch television. What we have to do is provide the best possible choices. But if we don't have the choice, then we've already made the decision, haven't we? And that's what we're trying to avoid in this discussion about what happens with the future of public television.
I'd like to add a parenting anecdote, because I think you did bring in parents and you did bring in teachers, and they are going to be critical in the future of kids' understanding and use of media. And I'd just like to tell a very quick story. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 more on the way. And these 4 kids love to watch television. They watch lots of television. But none of them, as yet, know that there is such a thing as commercial broadcast entertainment television. They're not even sure about PBS. And the reason is that television for them is something that you take off the shelf in a little box and put it in a machine and play it. And on that shelf are video cassettes and books. And the video cassettes were taped off the air. They were bought. They were rented. I blush to admit some of them were taped from rented copies. But they got there because some parent cared enough to put them there and to let the children watch over and over again, as they do with their favorite books, the stories that are dear and near to them.
And to follow up on that, a lot of the choices that are available from the new technology, which I mentioned earlier, are not available to kids who need them the most. They are expensive. Cable is expensive. Some of the pay channels are money on top of money, and they provide a number of the choices that cable does provide for children. And that if we don't really take care of the public sector of broadcasting, we are going to have a situation in this country that will make what's going on now look nice by comparison, when we don't reach one whole big portion of kids growing up in America. So I want to take very good care of PBS.
And I just want to add to that comment, Peggy, that we haven't talked this morning about the evidence that I think is now conclusive about the impact of watching violence on television and on children's behavior. We have argued about this issue ever since the Surgeon General's report back in 1972, talking about the impact of television viewing on children's behavior. There have been many studies since, and it is like the old problem we have every time there's another irrefutable piece of evidence about the linkage between smoking and lung cancer. There will be somebody well paid who will stand up and say, well, that's not definitive. And we face the same problem when we talk about the effects of violence and children's behavior. But Peggy is right. I mean, this is not just a do-gooder, altruistic, nice thing that people like Peggy and I and the rest of us here think should be done because we like children's television. Certainly I do, and I believe strongly in it, and that's what my daughter watched, and we read the books that went along with it. But I am equally concerned about the other side of the equation that the professor talked about, and that is those children who are not watching the 25 minutes a day of public broadcasting, but are instead watching the 25 minutes of commercial television without much parental supervision or mediation as to what they are seeing. It is absolutely true that not every child who watches hundreds of hours of violent television becomes violent. But most of the reason for that rests in the home and the neighborhood that are structured and coherent enough that the child's experience of watching television is mediated. But in the absence of that mediation and in the absence of the other factors that help a child separate reality from fantasy, that help a child learn empathy and sensitivity, it is absolutely clear that the television watching habits of vulnerable children will affect both their own violent behavior and their response to violence that they see around them. It has a desensitizing impact. So this is an issue that we think goes far beyond the narrow concerns of the group of us who are arguing strongly to preserve public television, and particularly educational and children's programming. It is also a plea to all programmers of television, including commercial television, to think about the impact of your decisions. The bottom line can be described in many ways. Only one of those descriptions concerns profitability and the dollars that come in. There's a bottom line to society as well. And we think that bottom line is better served by having better television programming for our children. Thank you all very much for being with us. Waiting for. We are about to adjourn to the sculpture garden here, where we will be able to meet the very important people in many of our children's lives, people like Big Bird and Alice Snuffleupagus and others. And we invite you all to join.
I cannot imagine anything that serves the public interest more than seeing to it that we give our children at least 3 hours of educational television a week. That's why it gives me great pleasure to announce that the 4 major networks, the National Association of Broadcasters, and some of the leading advocates for educational television have come together to join me in supporting a new proposal to require broadcasters to air 3 hours of quality educational programming a week. This proposal fulfills the promise of the Children's Television Act, that television should serve the educational and informational needs of our young people. It gives broadcasters flexibility in how to meet those needs, and it says to America's parents, you are not alone. We are all committed to working with you to see that educational programming for your children makes the grade. I urge the FCC to adopt this proposal, to make the 3-hour rule the law of the land. Television can build up young lives rather than tear them down. I'd like to say a particular word of thanks to Congressman Ed Markey for his work on this issue, and a very special word of appreciation to the Vice President for his tireless efforts, along with Greg Simon, to bring about this agreement. I thank them very, very much. Today we can work to imagine television as a force for good, to imagine what television for children would look like if it resembled what we imagined it was when we were children or when you first got started in this business. In recent days, as families have gathered to watch the Olympics, we've all been reminded about the good that television can bring into our homes, how it can bring us together, how it can inspire and educate us. This should be our standard. I'm anxious now to get to work. And I'd like to invite 3 people to come up here for some comments of their own about the agreement that has been reached. Eddie Fritz, the president of the National Association of Broadcasters. Les Moonves, the president of CBS Entertainment. Peggy Charon, founder of Action for Children's Television. Peggy, Les, Eddie, would you come up?
Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Gore, let me begin by making clear, as broadcasters, we consider ourselves Americans first and broadcasters second. We agree with you that as a nation, broadcasters recognize that children are our most valuable asset. We take seriously our obligations to broadcast to the needs and interests of children in their respective communities across the land. And broadcasters are particularly cognizant of our obligation to serve the educational and informational needs of children, which was set forth in the Children's Television Act. Now, I'm extremely pleased that we have reached an agreement with your representatives on the proposed changes of the rules. An outline of this proposal I have just given to the President, and we believe that this does, in fact, offer broadcasters the flexibility under which we can meet our obligations under the law. That was a very important part of our being able to put this arrangement together. We also believe that if the FCC implements this agreement according to the outline which we have constructed, that we will oppose any effort to challenge the decision in court, and I can assure you that NAB will not file a challenge ourselves. We would hope that the administration and all of the children's advocacy groups joining with broadcasters would work together in opposing any decision that goes beyond the boundaries of this agreement. We believe we will be successful, and the children of the United States will be the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Vice President Gore, Mrs. Gore, we are pleased to join you in this important agreement to renew and expand our commitment to provide quality children's programming, and pleased that this issue is moving in a positive direction for all parties concerned, and most importantly for the children of America. We applaud your leadership in this area. I think I speak for many broadcasters when I say we are proud of our commitment to serving children and the broader public interest, and we are sometimes frustrated when that commitment is questioned. There are already many wonderful children's educational programs on the air, programs like Bill Nye's and Beekman's World, to name a few, and I hope this meeting helps them win more of the acclaim they so richly deserve. And we are prepared to go forward based on this agreement to develop new programs of the highest quality that will garner the largest possible audience. It will not be easy. A television programmer is a little like a Major League Baseball player. The best in the majors make out 7 out of 10 times. Given the intense competition for viewers, it is hard both in prime time and in children's programming to launch new shows, and we fail far more often than we succeed. It is easier to put on more programming. It is far harder to put on more quality programming that kids will actually want to watch. But that is our challenge, and is one that broadcasters will take on aggressively. Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, just as our task does not end with this meeting today, I hope you take on another assignment on children's television. We need your help in calling for a new partnership between broadcasters and parents. When we air these programs and tell parents when and where to find them, parents in turn need to encourage their children to watch. Many of the programs on now are well suited to parents and children watching together. And I believe many of the experts here today would agree that children and parents watching together enhances the educational potential of these shows. Such a call to parents is tailor-made for the spirit of this agreement. We will look forward not only to our dialogue today, but to an ongoing discussion and cooperation with all who are concerned with the future of our children. Thank you very much.
And here is a parent, and even a grandparent. And I was afraid I would float right by the podium because I'm so pleased to be here today for what I think is a very historic event. This is the first time in 26 years that we have all parts of the problem agreeing that we really have to do something to put terrific TV for kids on the air.